We decided that in the margins of the Africa Day celebration, we would have a very important event, which is themed African Interactive, connecting to Africa past via smart media. The objective is therefore to disseminate information on the project that is aimed at contributing to reduce ignorance and prejudice towards African civilizations, as well as enabling young Africans, those in the diaspora and those at home, to establish deeper connection to their eminent contribution to world cultural heritage. As would soon be elaborated by the eminent professor, Titus Leber, the brain behind this project, Africa Interactive intends to use technology to gather, aggregate, and disseminate African cultural heritage and make this information accessible through smart media to young Africans. It is also intended to preserve our cultural heritage. The African Group is pleased to be associated with this project, which has also received support from the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. It is now my privilege and honor to invite Professor Titus Leber to deliver a brief presentation on the project.
Ambassador Johnson, Excellencies, Directors Generals, Deputy Generals, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor today to be here and to be invited today to present you my project Africa Interactive, which is supposed to gather and disseminate the cultural heritage of Africa and to make it accessible to anybody who has a smart device in his pocket. We will use state-of-the-art technology, and the project is based on 4 different pillars. The first one I suggest, because the living patrimony of Africa is very, very rapidly vanishing, to establish in Africa rapid intervention crews who can go wherever there is a celebration, a rite, something happening in Africa. Also record the knowledge of the elders. In the old times, people in Africa used to gather around the fire, and the elders would pass on orally the rich tradition. In the new times, the spark is an electric spark, and we can bring and fix all this old knowledge onto smartphones, onto smart devices, and pass it on. Every elder who dies in Africa is a library getting lost, so there's a great need to record this oral heritage, and this is the first pillar. The second pillar is to bring back to Africa whatever is disseminated of your rich, rich cultural heritage in museums and collections all over the world. But let's start to already virtually restitute whatever is disseminated to make people aware and to make young people proud of what Africa has contributed to the world cultural heritage. The third pillar is to connect, obviously, with big archives, photographers who over the last century have audiovisually recorded a lot of the patrimony which is already lost, and bring them into the project. And the fourth pillar is to bring in scholars, universities, the whole knowledge gathered in the internet, and bring all this in the reach of every young internaut which can travel from his pocket on his smartphone through this rich heritage of Africa. How to navigate this rich heritage? There is a myth in Ghana that a spider trickster named Anansi went to the sun god and stole from him all stories of the world, and namely all stories of Africa, and brought them to humanity. So what did the spider do? The spider built a web of stories, and shouldn't we be proud here in this circle that Africa anticipated with this web of wisdom the internet by probably several hundred years, maybe millenniums of years. So I use this metaphor of the spider web to make people navigate through this rich heritage, namely also by using glass beads. Glass beads play a very important role in many African countries, and there are many different ways to navigate this heritage. So every glass bead on my spider web will be a different entry point, and by touchscreen and by touching these different glass beads, you will be able to navigate in many different ways through this heritage. So let me show you a few ways on how we can navigate. Obviously, we should start with the people of Africa, and whether they come from the far east of the continent, whether they are modern young people, traditional old cultures, people from the north, from the desert, ecstatic dancers from Western Africa or Central Africa, no matter from where they come, we should learn to get to Africa through its peoples by knowing better their traditions, their rights, their history, and we can enter in an interactive way right into Yoruba culture, just an example, obviously. Another way to travel the continent is by its great traditional commercial roads, the rivers and the caravan roads. And we can touch any of the rivers, this whole thing will be touchscreen. And there we are, flying along with a drone, the major rivers. And if we see, like here in the center, a point which could be possibly of interest, we touch it, we are there instantly, in this case in Mali, from where we can go to an overview of the main pillars which constituted the key points and the key events marking a country, a civilization. So the idea is really to build a large number of micro-projects, we call them micro-projects, which give you a first entrance to the key elements which constitute each cultural circle. Like in this case, for instance, for Mali, the famous Emperor Mansa Musa, who crossed the Sahara on his pilgrimage to Mecca, the richest man of all times, who went out with caravans, 60,000 people in the Middle Ages to cross the Sahara. From here we can go to African history. Egyptian civilization played obviously a very, very important role, as did Meroe with its pyramids. Not to forget the eminent African empires in the Middle Ages, when Europe was still in the dark ages of the Middle Ages, and there will be a possibility to travel through these different kingdoms. But most importantly, Africa has heroes. Why do we need a Disneyification in Africa when Africa has its own heroes and should express their stories in Africa's own language and through their own view? Especially also at the great women who shaped Africa's history. There's a large number of great empresses, queens, liberation fighters from all parts, from Burkina Faso, from Angola, from Ghana, who were important women who really shaped, very importantly, history. A very important way to navigate the continent is to do by countries. Many people in the Western world don't even know where the countries are. They have never heard the names, they don't know the flags, they don't know the history. So you will have an interactive way to navigate through the continent and then again come to the country, get to the micro-projects which point you directly to the main pillars which have constituted the history of the continent. I've been working a lot in Senegal, for instance. For each country, I developed a specific navigation metaphor. In Senegal, it's the baobab tree, which looks like a neuron and which allows you, again, to navigate the history, the museums, and so on. Now, this is the way how we normally walk to an African museum today. I know there are many new museums, but the way I suggest to do it is to go to the objects and then point right away to whatever is the context of the object and bring it together with the living history. So you will have immediately the possibility to connect artifacts and living cultural heritage. Another very interesting example, the initiation rites in Burkina Faso, les mascafeuilles, young men who become initiated get dressed in the forest. Very rare footage I was able to get my hands on, how the initiated are dressed up in the sacred forest and then walk to the city and bring their ancient secret knowledge to society. Another important museum in Africa is the new Museum of Black Civilizations in Dakar, which has a remarkable collection of bronzes from Benin. And I asked him, wouldn't it be nice to go from your museum to all the different collections of Benin bronzes around the world? Within one fingertip, we're in Vienna, and can see from here not only the bronzes of Benin, but go into the whole civilization. Here I would like to open a very quick parenthesis on the question of restitution. It's a very hot discussion today, and we had in Vienna the chance a few months ago to receive Achille Mbembe. He is quoted to be one of the fathers of the concept of restitution. And when he saw the program of Africa Interactive, he went right on the stage and said he considers virtual restitution as important and equally important as physical restitution. Both should be complementary. It's very important to use these possibilities we have now in 3D to make these treasuries worldwide accessible. This is an example of the quality by which we can catch today African artifacts in 3D and make it visible from all sides, from all parts, enter into it, and just shows you to which extent we can seize it in quality here. And that brings me kind of to a quick second part. COVID time, no possibility to travel to Africa, but I took advantage of this period to gather the material of Africa in Austrian collections, and there's a lot of hidden treasures in private collections, namely, for instance, the Museum Jaunik in Carinthia, which has one of the richest Ghanaian gold collections in the world, and it will just show you how you can navigate through these riches of Ghana's and the Akan civilization by visiting virtually this museum. You will be able to make your choice to any object by pointing of it, and then, very important, you will have two different ways to explore objects, either by looking at the conventional information or going to Anansi to the spider and then network the whole content with whatever is relevant. And here we are back to the living heritage of Ghana in this case. We can go again back to the country, to the heritage background. And this is very important. We talk a lot today from the Internet of Things. But if we consider, instead of fridges or cars or light in a room, African objects to be intelligent things loaded with a lot of connectivity, we could build up very, very rich systems of understanding, of connecting, and build an internet of smart interconnections, which brings us obviously to the metaverse, where young people will love to navigate in 3D, and where they will enjoy in 3D to go through the African cultural heritage. A few other examples of African collections. Mr. Shongun, who is with us, has a rich collection. He has crossed 30 times the Sahara. Downstairs in the rotunda, you will see some of his objects. And you can see again the fantastic quality in 3D, seeing these hidden treasures, which normally not many people can see. steppage collection. A very interesting thing is, I call this ensemble of gathered objects AI, Africa Interactive. But just consider with the exponential growth of these seized and recorded objects, what this will mean in terms of big data for the field of artificial intelligence. So imagine the power of Africa Interactive, of all this material gathered, multiplied by the power of artificial intelligence. This will do an immense step forward in terms of better understanding, of better accessing the cultural past of the continent, and it will bring us to an eye-to-eye level where people from abroad will learn to better appreciate Africa, where young people from Africa will learn better to appreciate their own contribution to the world cultural heritage. So this will go to AI times 3, which is Africa Interactive times artificial intelligence times African identity. And I'd like to wish very, very happy birthday. Allow me to say to my brothers and sisters from Africa, happy birthday.